Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It is me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and we're back this week with another scintillating episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated, where we're going to dig into a long-lost little bit of comic book ephemera regarding the G.I. Joe team. That's right, gang. Today, we're looking at Blackthorn Publishing's G.I. Joe in 3D #1 from 1987. I am excited to do this, and I'm really happy to be doing this alongside you all. So thanks for coming along on this ride. New listeners, this is the podcast where I've covered every episode of the cartoons, the Sunbow, the DIC, the Extreme. We've also talked about all 155 issues of the comic book, and we're branching out and doing more. We just did some Action Force annuals. Now we're doing some 3D stuff. Last week we finished the Marvel books little mini run. So, you know, I'm covering all my bases, and I hope everyone's enjoying it too. So if you're new to the show, or if you're an old timer and you just haven't said hi in a while, please reach out to me on social media. It's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at JoeOnJoePod. You can send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com and let me know how your day's going. My week was going well. We were supposed to be going to the TF Con out here in Los Angeles. And guess what I did? Total rookie mistake. But I waited till the last minute to get my ticket because I was accompanying a friend there, and so I was a little last minute to go, and they were sold out. TF Con blowing up. Apparently the 40th anniversary of Transformers really brought out the TF heads, and I appreciate it though. That's great. So I'm happy that if that meant one super Transformers fan got in, you know, besides this guy who would literally go there to shop for every piece of G.I. Joe that I could find. I'm actually glad for that. So that actually makes me happy. So I hope everyone had fun at the TF Con. If you were looking for me, I apologize because I had spoken, I think it was either this podcast or maybe it was over on What's on Joe Mind. I said, I'm going to be at Transformers Con. Wasn't there. I drove there, dropped my cousin off there, but I wasn't there. But it sounded fun. It sounded great. Like every voice actor was there. A lot of G.I. Joe voice actors were there. So I'm sure there was some crossover. So if you're listening and you were there and you had fun, I love it. Love to hear it. Yeah. And going back to social media, one of the great things about that is you can ask to be a guest on the show. We do a segment called You on Joe, where you're the host of the show, and we talk about your favorite thing about G.I. Joe. So if you have a specific favorite thing about G.I. Joe and you want to talk about it, shoot me an email over to Gmail, and we'll get you on. You can also support the show by going to our patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod and be a Patreon, help keep the show afloat. And you can also just say hi to our great sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast.
In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies in a Meal podcast. The Movies in a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews. They do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies in a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too.
All right, so like I said, this week we're talking G.I. Joe in 3D. I haven't read this book in probably 30 years, 87, 80, 97, 2007, 17, 30 years. Yeah, so probably 30 years, easily at least 30 years. It's been in my collection this whole time. I can see my grubby little fingerprints from when I was a child on it. That's really awesome. Like I remember I got this very, very early when it was published. So I've had this book in my collection for a long time. And quite frankly, it's in really good shape. There's a couple spine ticks on it. And like I said, the fingerprints on the back. But interestingly enough, what I don't remember about it is the cover is the same. It's a newsprint style cover. Like if it's not the exact same paper, it's definitely not a high gloss cover stock. So they were definitely cutting corners there. And it was published by Blackthorn Publishing. Blackthorn Publishing, according to Wiki, an American comic publisher from like 1986 to 1989. They actually were in the top 5 comic publishers at the time. They had a lot of licenses. They did adaptations for California Raisins, Dick Tracy. The final nail in their coffin, unfortunately, was Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. What actually drove them is they paid way too much for the license, and then no one cared about it. So that actually drove them in. But they did reprints of old strips, like newspaper strips. They did Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. They had a great Dave Stevens cover. Stuff called, they did Battle Beasts. They did Star Wars in 3D. They did the adaptation of the Schwarzenegger film Red Heat. Schwarzenegger and Jim Belushi, not John Belushi, Jim Belushi. They did a BattleTech release, Battle Force release. They did an adaptation of that movie Waxwork. That's awesome. So they shifted gears and did a lot of 3D stuff right around 1987. That's when they decided to go whole hog into that. And that's where you get your 6 issues of G.I. Joe 3D, you get your Transformers 3D, your Star Wars 3D, all that stuff. They also did the How to Draw books, like How to Draw G.I. Joe, which we're probably going to cover here. We might actually do it more video. That could be fun, but I got to get that set up. And they did paperback books, etc., and so on and so forth. So they actually blew up. They did pretty well. And then, like a lot of things, it grew too big, and they apparently didn't do well with Moonwalker. Now, their editor-in-chief was a man by the name of John Stevenson. And so John Stevenson is actually the author of G.I. Joe in 3D. I don't know if he wrote all the books, but according to his wiki, it looks like he wrote 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So it sounds like maybe he didn't write number 4. So we're going to find out when we get there. And I do have all those. So we will be covering all those. So John Stevenson is the writer. And I'm going to say this before we start. I think he does a delightful job. I think this issue is really good. I think it absolutely could stand as a G.I. Joe adventure. It plays out like a comic book version of the Sunbow cartoon. There's not a lot of twists and turns. I'll say that. I'll demerit it a little bit for that. It is pretty straightforward. But as far as characters being in character, dialogue kind of being on point, kind of getting the MacGuffins of what makes a fun G.I. Joe story a fun G.I. Joe story, he's kind of there. The overall thing, it deals with a raptor, fan favorite raptor, which can't wait for our classified raptor. Him being a kind of a DNA geneticist, that's a little weird. But I feel like that might have been driven a lot by, what characters they may have been given to use. It was 1987, so I'm certainly they were pushing them. Obviously Dr. Mindbender would have been a better character to use for what the guts of what this story is. But overall, I wasn't offended. A lot of times when someone, especially in this era, when someone that's not Larry writes an issue of G.I. Joe, it's always a little jarring and stuff. I didn't find that in this case. I thought it folded right into place. The artwork is by a gentleman named E.R. Cruz. And E.R. Cruz was a Filipino artist who did a ton of stuff in the 70s. He did a lot of war books, a lot of horror books. He worked on G.I. Combat, Ghosts, All Out War, House of Mystery, House of Secrets, Jonah Hex, Fighting Forces, Secrets of Haunted House, like Sergeant Rock. He was a part of that great 70s Filipino revolution in comic books. I've seen his stuff before without even realizing it in 2 places. And I was really excited to see this. One, he did the Sherlock Holmes one-shot from 1975. The reason I noticed that, and I have that in my collection, is because it's got a Walter Simonson cover, and I'm an absolute Walter Simonson head. So I've had that book for a long time. So now this makes me want to dig that back out and read it. But he also, the other thing that he did is he eventually worked in animation, and he did the X-Men Pride of the X-Men layouts, which is the pilot for the X-Men cartoon that never really happened in the 80s. This is during the right post the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends era, but it was pre X-Men animated series. They did the Pride of the X-Men one-shot animation special, and it was awesome. Two, it was mostly well known for being having an Australian Wolverine, ironically prophetic, because we would eventually get an Australian Wolverine, but the voice actor literally was just doing an Australian accent, so he sounded more like a Dreadnought instead of a Canadian. But it was a great story. It was Magneto, and he's trying to get Kitty Pryde, and there's an Asteroid M involved. It's great. And then the X-Men arcade game that we all loved and played in like 1990, 91, 92, that was based on Pride of the X-Men. All the art styles and stuff and the adventure, a lot of that came from Pride of the X-Men. So Pride of the X-Men was really cool. They would show it occasionally on those like Saturday morning blocks of superhero cartoons, and they would tease it, so you'd have to make sure you caught it and record it and stuff. They did a VHS release of it, and they probably have put out a DVD at some point of it, but it's really worth tracking down. But he worked on the layouts for it, so that's really awesome. He also did layouts for the Transformers TV show, and he eventually ended his career working, and he's still with us, but his last known credits in comics were Savage Sword of Conan and Call the Conqueror stuff in the 1990s over at Marvel, and that's his last contributions to it. So I say that to say it's a well-drawn book, and it's very much got that 70s vibe, that 70s war comic vibe even. It's got a little grit to it. It is not influenced by any of the tomfoolery that was seeping into comic books in the late 80s, early 90s. It is real 70s storytelling, and I'm here for it. I love it. I think it's great. So we're going to dig in. It's also oversized, which I do not recall being. I was really expecting this to be a little shorter. It is 30 pages, like 29 pages, or it's 30 pages with ads. So I think it's a little longer than your standard 22 page, but we're going to, like, as far as storytelling goes, we're going to get into that. So G.I. Joe in 3D, it's got a fun cover. It's got a cover that pops just simply because the color they use. They use a bright pink background, so that really pops. So I'm sure you've all seen it before. It's a little washed out as far as the other colors go. Like Raptors, it's kind of a monochrome color. And I'm not sure. I mean, it's a full 4-color cover, but like the blues and the reds really pop. I'm wondering if that had something to do with just, I don't know, the printing process or something, because it feels like it's a little like maybe it is 4 colors and not, I don't know. But there's there's browns, there's yellows, there's greens. But it's cool. And I think the effect is that it makes it feel different. It makes it pop in a way of, this isn't your average comic book adventure. This isn't, this is like something special. It's Sergeant Slaughter leading a battalion of the 87 Joes. You've got Tunnel Rat, Jinx, Falcon, Frostbite, Beachhead. I think in the back that's supposed to be Chuckles. Yeah, I think that's Chuckles. I think it's supposed to be. It's a little, he doesn't really look like it, but I think if that's who he is, that's how he's drawn in the comic book. And then you've got Raptor kind of looming over them, and then over Raptor is Cobra Commander in his silver battle uniforms. So came out in 1987, $2.50. Came with your 3D glasses, which I have a pair. I don't know if these were from them, but I'd like to keep a pair of 3D glasses on hand at any time. You never know when they're going to come in handy. Yo, Joe! So we turn the page, and we've got an ad for other Blackthorn publishing books. If you like G.I. Joe in 3D, pick up these titles too. And they did 3D Flintstones, 3D Bullwinkle and Rocky, Transformers, Bozo the Clown, Chicago's very own Bozo the Clown in 3D, although I know Bozo was worldwide, but Chicago was the big one. Laurel and Hardy in 3D, and of course Gumby in 3D. 1987 imprint, and it tells you for the lenses, make sure the left lens is the red one and the right lens is the blue one. So I'm going to put my 3D glasses on now, and if there are pauses in my narration / dictation, that is, please bear with me. The combination of being old, my eyes are going bad. I've got my regular glasses on, and now I've got 3D glasses on. It is difficult to see this book. And I want to give it the full 3D experience too. I don't want to, because you can read it. You certainly can read this without the 3D on, but what's the point of that, right? So, yeah. All right, here we go. Oh, I think we got it now. Of Birds and Men. That's the name of the story, and I like it. We got a nice splash page with Sergeant Slaughter leading, looks like Chuckles, and Low Light, and probably Falcon, and I think Mainframe, and they're on a jog, like a PT jog. And this fits with how Sergeant Slaughter was portrayed both in the comic and in the movie. You know, he was their PT instructor, and right away Sergeant Slaughter's in the front, and he does look 3D. There ain't no half step in here. Hold on. Had to clean these 3D lenses for a sec. So it's a traditional little PT thing of less talk, more leg. Story by John Stevenson, art by E.R. Cruz, letters by David Cody Weiss, and the 3D process is done by the Flying Fritches.
Yo, Joe!
These men are not in the mood to appreciate nature's efforts, so they are exhausted. And we've got Mainframe here taking a sabbatical. Oh my Aiken, and he's exhausted. We've got a nice little close-up of his sweaty face, and basically he's saying, "I'm a computer nerd, Sergeant Slaughter. Why do I have to work hard?" And Slaughter's response is, "You think just because you're a disc whiz, you don't need to keep in shape? Well, pal, it's my job to see you got a special body to go with that special head." And nice use of close-ups and like medium shots to really establish where these guys are at. They're in a seemingly like a woodland area on a trail. They're all exhausted. Chuckles is exhausted. Everyone's wiped out, and Sergeant Slaughter is casually leaning on a rock. It doesn't look like he's lost a beat. And who told you to take 5 low light, etc., so on. And right before he's like, let's get ready to move it, girls. There is a little swing thing, and it looks like what would be a dart hits the tree or rock next to him.
Yo, Joe!
A bunch of like savage-looking dudes come out of nowhere. So we've got a third panel splash with worm's eye view, so you get the Joes in the feature in the middle, and then there's some screaming. It's like these guys are savages, and it's more than just the screaming. They're literally like their clothes are torn. They're dressed like savages. They're not wearing a Cobra uniform per se, and they're attacking the Joes, who are now hunched up back to back in a little semicircle. And then we get 3 solid vertical panels of the Joes fighting, Sergeant Slaughter throwing a lot of punches. And these punches, this is really utilizing that 3D technique, because what do you do when you go to a 3D movie? There's a lot of things that come out to you, like someone shoots a harpoon at from Friday the 13th, right? Shoots a harpoon at the camera. People throw things at camera. People throw punches towards the camera. And that's what they're doing here. So Sergeant Slaughter is throwing punches towards the camera. In all 3 of these panels, something's coming at the reader. So that works really well for the 3D effect. And what Cruz does is he starts wide, and you see kind of everybody fighting. It's like a big little Donnybrook. And then he comes a little closer. He's kind of a mid shot to see Sergeant Slaughter making his move. And then in the third panel, this savage, we don't really know who they are yet, he gets the upper hand and he actually decks Sergeant Slaughter, which is, not something that didn't happen very often. I also want to take this moment to point out that the artwork itself is very 3D friendly. It's not simplified by any stretch, and there is some hatchwork, but there's not a lot of hatchwork. It is it's very open. There's not a ton of rendering when it comes to like where there are black spotted, where you get a lot of what would normally be like black ink. That's really driving the form of the pages. And there's not a lot of, let's say, for example, there's a plant, like they're in the woods, right? So there's plants and stuff. They haven't drawn the details on the leaves. They just drawn the outline of the plants and on the rocks and on the trees and all that stuff. And that works really well with the 3D because really all you need is the outlines of it because you're essentially duplicating the outline. And we should go over the 3D process in case no one's ever seen a 3D comic book. You guys know what 3D is, but we know what currently we go to the theater, you see something in 3D, you put on the special, like the clear white lenses and the screen pops in 3D. Well, this is old school 3D. This is blue and red printing, and your blue and red lenses would, the blue filters out the blue and the red filters out the red. So what happens is you print the page and you take the register of the page, and instead of laying them flat on top of each other, which you normally would do so that it looks like a clean, you shift them in one direction or the other, like left to right. So it's the same drawing, but the blue lines are sitting a little further to the right and the red lines are sitting a little further to the left. There's also a difference in what do you call not thickness, but difference in like the blue is more faint than the red. The red is working as the black here, and the blue is really it's much lighter in heaviness on the page. And what's really cool is there are the way they've done this, and this is how you get different elements of 3D to look differently. Is when I said left to the right, pieces of the image are left and then pieces of the image are to the right. So in this top panel, one of the Savage's legs, the red is sitting more left and the blue is going to the right? But then in the background, Chuckles, his blue is sitting to the left and his red is sitting to the right. So what do you get? You get layers. You get him looking further back than Sergeant Slaughter. And when you have that, your eyes make that contrast, and that's what makes it look like they're on different planes of vision. So it's all of, obviously it's all visual trickery, but it really works pretty well. And if you close your eyes, and because like the red's the predominant one, and you close your eyes and you just look through the red lens, you almost don't see anything on the page at all, because really all you're seeing is the lighter blue markings. And when you go the opposite, you don't see any of the blue, you just see the red, and seeing the red filtered through the blue lens, it almost looks black. So the result is an almost full-on black and white page with images that look like they're sitting on different planes of vision. Maybe simplify, probably a lot of you understand that's why, but in case you've never actually seen a 3D printed comic book, because they don't really do a lot of these anymore, that's kind of the effect of it. And it works. The 3D effect really works pretty well. But to drive that home is they do a lot of things that are a lot of punches and a lot of things being thrown, So on this next page, Yo, Joe! Sergeant Slaughter is very much in the foreground. He's been knocked out. So someone's getting thrown. I'm not sure. And they're not really in their costumes. So they're in these exercise togs. I think that might be Mainframe that's getting thrown. But a lot of people being thrown, getting punched. And this is the first hint that we get that they're working with Cobra. It's his first test to complete success, return to base. And they leave the Joes on this glen, completely beaten and laying on the ground, as these zombie-looking dudes that don't. That's a little spoiler for the end of the comic book. As these savage dudes kind of walk off into the distance.
Yo, Joe!
So now we find out where we're at, and we are at the Great Lakes Naval Academy. This is the temporary headquarters of the G.I. Joe team. Great Lakes Naval Academy is near where I grew up. It is in northern Illinois. It is near Waukegan. For me, it's on the way to Gurnee to go to Great America Amusement Park. You would always see the signs for the Great Lakes Naval Academy. Anyone we knew that went into the Navy, they went up and they were stationed at Great Lakes to, for their basic or something, or they just got stationed there. So this is all happening in my backyard. And later on, they mentioned Batavia, which is really funny. So the G.I. Joe is operating in Illinois. I wonder if it has something to do with, even though the Cobra town of Springfield is not in the story, but if when they were writing this, they knew that Cobra operated out of, quote, Springfield. And so they figured maybe Cobra had a base in Illinois. I don't know, but I maybe chuckle a little bit that they're working out of the Great Lakes Naval Academy. So we've got Hawk in front of it's a debrief meeting, and we're used to seeing these in the G.I. Joe stories. So this very much reads like a special missions, and these guys showed up out of nowhere, and over the last few days, this has been happening frequently. And they just struck again. And the most bizarre thing, as General Hawk says, and it's funny, everyone's wearing berets in this. Like they've got Hawk in a beret. Hawk doesn't wear a beret, but he's wearing kind of a version of his bomber jacket, but he's also in a beret. But he's saying that these thugs exhibit strength, speed, and endurance bordering on the superhuman. And then they apparently have video footage of this. And in the video footage, again, more punches being thrown, more people being thrown around, and that helps the 3D effect. And you see General Hawk fighting these guys. He's in the video footage they've got. He's got his full 87 general look with the helmet on and the goggles and the helmet. And they say that this one dude that they were able to subdue, he took 7 tranquilizers before he went down. That is a lot of tranquilizers.
Yo, Joe!
And now we get introduced via this video little lesson that he's giving them. And what's neat is, yes, they're watching video footage of this, but the way they tell this story is we, the viewer, actually goes inside this video. This can't be footage that they've captured. They don't have all these camera angles. So really the crews and the writer, they take us into this video, and we see Jinx doing a lot of martial arts stuff, swinging a sword. They say she's every bit as good as Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. She was trained by the Hardmaster himself. And she apparently barely lasted a minute fighting this monster. And she'll be fine in a couple days, says the doctor. So she's messed up. Fun and games are over for these guys. We're back in the meeting room. And somehow there's an army out there that's stronger and faster and tougher than the Joes.
Yo, Joe!
So it is time to now check in on the bad guys. That makes total sense. So a Wednesday, what day of the week was the other one? Hold on. I completely forgot. Oh, it's Wednesday. So that was 0800. So this is an hour and a half later in a clandestine research facility outside of Batavia, Illinois, which later on, whether they mean to be clandestine or not, they regard to as, I believe it's the Fermi Labs, which is the Fermi Labs out in Western Illinois, like the western suburbs of Chicago. So yeah, that's a real place. And that's apparently where Cobra is doing experiments. We get our guy Raptor, and there he is, shirtless. He's got his wing. He's got his bird with him. He's screaming, this is it. All is working so well. And this doctor, who's kind of nameless, I think they just call him Doctor, he says, hey, we got a lot of testing ahead of us, and we're learning that all of these genetic dudes, they're all Raptor's plan. It's his plan, my lovely plan. The doctor's very concerned about the formula, and according to Raptor, my special serum combines the best of both species to make the perfect, the ultimate power formula. They're joining man and bird, everybody. That's what we're getting here. That part I don't necessarily get. Like, you know, these guys don't seem bird-like. They just seem, super powered and zombie-like. The bird part of it escapes me a little bit. But, any port in a storm, I guess. That's why I feel like this is more of a mindbender thing, where, he's developed some type of superhuman thing, not a raptor who is a tax accountant. Now he's doing DNA stuff. But again, you work with what you got. And I have a strong feeling they were given kind of strict instructions as to what characters they could use here. I just have a feeling on that. But nice storytelling. A nice combination of establishing shots, close-ups, fun angles from the sky, like a triumphant raptor in the final panel that breaks the borders a little bit. It pops. It works. Even this on this top panel, this establishing shot, because it's 3D, he puts these laboratory pieces. I don't know what they are, but some scientific mumbo jumbo in the foreground. So that adds depth to this field because, again, you're working in 3D.
Yo, Joe!
Now we learn that this is also going to be a parable about the abuse of anabolic steroids. Combining the latest in anabolic steroids with the essential properties of bird DNA was a stroke of genius. These men will be stronger and faster, and the doctor reminds us they'll be dead unless we take the time to test properly. So, the doctor's playing that role of testing. And all Raptor wants to do is get this stuff out there in the wild. With his super army, he's going to show Cobra Commander who's insane and who's not. And we see here in an illustrative image that his soldiers can withstand 50,000 volts of electricity. I don't know where that's from, but they can withstand it. And, it's a nice 3D effect of one of these weirdos. Why they have to be dressed like savages, I don't understand that. Like, put them in Cobra uniforms. That'd be amazing and scary and hard to tell who's normal. I don't know.
Yo, Joe!
And this is where I first realized that, like, these pages where I realized that the pacing is going to be a little slower. Like I said early up top, there's not a lot of story beats for my liking. So we've established now over the course of this going on third page that they're working on this experiment and they're making these dudes superhuman. That's no new information, really. It's new that Cobra's doing it and that Raptor's doing it and that it's bird DNA, but we've already seen how tough they are. They showed that to us in the first battle. And then again, they told us in Hawk's debrief with the guys. And now we're seeing it again, but from the Cobra perspective. And it's just like, it's proving how resistant they are. So now we've got shots of them getting shot at. Raptor saying, this is not the work of an insane man. No, I'm very sane. We see a guy strapped to the table, and the doctor's warning him that the DNA combination is mutating much faster than they predicted, which, does not make him happy because he likes a controlled experiment. And he says, subject 106 receives an extra 250 cc's, but there's no visible trauma. And he says, by the way, what were the results of the pilots we injected?
Yo, Joe!
And we have a page where Raptor tells us that didn't work out very well, which is kind of funny. And it's Raptor talking to these three pilots. They're not flying any recognizable Cobra plane, rather. But he says, his serum will allow you to fly as never before. He said, go, my birds. Let's see how your new abilities work. Fly, fly, fly. And 3 panels of airplane action. And this is very much war comic storytelling. Because you've got planes flying and then, going up a mountain and then they crash into a mountain. This is absolutely drawing on Cruise's background and doing war story. And the doctor says that's obviously a problem, so we need to rework the serum. So Raptor says it means nothing. So we've got 4 pages of kind of the same conversation. And we even have a moment where they introduce that if they give it to pilots, it's too much for them, but it's bird DNA. So, like, wouldn't it be more fun if they, like, were amazing pilots because they could see faster, and something along those lines. Like, it's weird that they single out using pilots, using bird DNA, but then that doesn't work. And it's kind of never really revisited. So that's weird. And and it slogs the story a little bit for me. So now, later on in the day, it's still Wednesday. It's 13:15 hours. So what is that? 1:15. The Joes are running around Great Lakes, Illinois. But we've got, is it? Falcon and Tunnel Rat, and I think Chuckles is there. Flint is there. And they look good. And I get this drawing on his war stuff. So the drawings of the soldiers look really tight. Tunnel Rat in particular looks really good. We get some sweet angles over the shoulder stuff. It's not static. It's very much camera in the middle of the group, like fighting with them, hunkered down, and they see that they found this group of these soldiers. So the Joes are going to try to sneak up on them. Hawk wants to take them alive, so they need to use some tranquilizers. And just then they get ambushed. Don't worry about our safety, soldier. You're going to be too busy. And so we see that there's a lot of these zombie soldiers. In this final panel, again, another example of this kind of lighter 3D work where there's not a lot of detail on the page, but there's a lot of outlining to form what you're looking at. So really, when you're drawing this 3D stuff, you really have to be a master of form, and a master of silhouette. That's the right word I'm thinking of. Because if your silhouettes are off, it's going to be really hard to tell what something is. So that's really the strength that he's showing on this page.
Yo, Joe!
And throughout the book, not just this page. It's really a master of silhouettes and form. So now the attack fight, the fight starts with someone screaming attack. And this is a great shot, man. This is the Joes are all in action. I think that might be, what's his name? Why am I thinking Airtight? The second G.I. Joe parachute guy besides Ripcord, Crazy Legs. I think that's supposed to be Crazy Legs. Or maybe it's Hawk, but it might be Crazy. I feel like it should be Crazy Legs, especially in 1987. They don't really name them. That's the other thing this one doesn't do, which is kind of good, is they don't hammer home the names, which I like in comic books, but it can get very heavy-handed, especially when you're dealing with licensed property, so you're dealing with toys. So sometimes when you see the non-Hama stuff, it can really get like, they're making sure you understand what this toy is called. He doesn't do that in this issue. There's definitely enough so you can follow along, but they don't, there's not extra dialogue to make sure you know exactly, like, that's Crazy Legs, if that is in fact Crazy Legs. But we've got the Joes fighting. There's also great panel work here. He's using a lot of angles on it, which for me helps this 3D feel. So they're not all static square or rectangle boxes. He's doing a lot of, angular layouts, which adds to the effect. And in this case, like when you get to the fourth panel on it, it's right before you turn the page. This panel stops halfway through, and then you just end up with no panel borders, but Chuckles and Flint or Falcon or whatever. It's Flint. And I say that because they both got the braids. That's all you can tell. They're breaking the panel, and that again adds to the pop of the 3D. So it works really well. You see the outline of the foliage, things like that. But they're fighting.
Yo, Joe!
And there's a lot of that. There's just a lot of fighting in this, and I think that's for the use of the 3D. You don't want a lot of sitting around conversation stuff. Like the next issue, just judging by the cover, it's them going into space. So I imagine there's some vehicular stuff going on there. There's not a lot of vehicles in this. But with the vehicle stuff, I think you could get a lot of 3D stuff, a lot of the shooting. But in this case, it's just a lot of punches being thrown, a lot of bodies being thrown. And that's what they're using to drive home the 3D thing. So Falcon is outnumbered. He's getting just decked by this dude. And rage turns an already powerful madman into a berserk killing machine. So this guy, whoever these dudes are, he is very upset, and he is whipping the tar out of Falcon. And Falcon, he's going to kill him. Like Falcon's screaming, and not really screaming. He's barely squeaking out that he needs some help. And this guy is screaming, die, die, as he chokes the life out of him.
Yo, Joe!
And suddenly the the giant collapses on top of Falcon. And it was Flint. He thinks Flint saved him, but Flint's like, I didn't do anything. The guy just keeled over. So it's like he had a heart attack, like it was too much. And then as the fighting stops, all the Joes are kind of looking around, and these dudes have become like zombies, like lemming zombies, and their arms are outstretched, and they're walking towards this cliff that, luckily happens to be nearby. The great giant cliffs of Gurnee, Illinois. And they jump off these cliffs. So I'm assuming this is a cliff it's got to be going to the Lake Michigan. I don't know where else there would be a cliff. And even then, there wouldn't be a cliff. But they're jumping off. They're killing themselves. Like lemmings, Raptors men's mysteriously, they march to their doom. And while that's happening, this is where we get the cover being blown on where the Cobra Lab is. It says back at Fermi Lab. Even though they never identified it being at Fermi Lab previously. They just said it was a mysterious lab in Batavia. Well, now we know. Fermi Lab, we got your number. You're a Cobra front. And Raptor's very upset with this.
Yo, Joe!
So we don't exactly know how he's monitoring the battle, but we know he's monitoring the battle. Kind of established earlier by all this video footage both sides had of these fights. So he's very upset. He says the Joes should have been killed instead of my men throwing themselves. Like, what does that even mean? Why do they throw themselves off the cliff? The doctor says that the formula is changing their men into who knows what. And now we cut back to, it's got to be Hawk. It's a little, it's interesting. It's a little bit jarring because it is Hawk. But then the caption that tells us we're back at the base of the cliff doesn't happen until the second panel. So it says at the base of the cliffs. It's Falcon reporting on these dudes. And so when they hit the bottom, they all died except for one. So they called Doc, and it's Doctor. And he's there, and he's checking out this one dude who's barely hanging on to life. And they're going to get him back to the academy to check him out. But then we go back to the lab in Batavia, to Fermi Lab. So there's no real shift, and because it's monochromatic because of the 3D effect, it's a little hard to track that. Sometimes you can accomplish with color, like this shift of changes, right? So if the Raptor stuff was, let's just say, like yellow backgrounds and a yellow color scheme, and then you cut to the exteriors where they're fighting, and it would be blue and green and lush, and then you cut back to the yellow, that visually is prompting you that you're changing locations. In this case, we're back to Raptor, and again, the caption saying that we're back to Raptor isn't until the second panel of this sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 6 panels on the page, and it's a well laid out page. It's just a little hard to track, the sequence of what's happening. Not if you're reading and paying attention, but you know what I'm saying. Just kind of visually a quick read through. It's a little jarring. So Raptor says, bring in more volunteers, because the doctor says he's confident he can continue to make it work.
Yo, Joe!
So later in the day, this is all happening on one Wednesday. Like, that is a packed Wednesday for real. The doctor is operating on a new guy. Oh, I'm sorry, rather. We're back at the Joe headquarters. We're back at the Naval Academy. So it's Doc who is operating on that guy that they captured. Sergeant Slaughter's looking over his shoulder through the viewing booth. And so we're at 1630 hours. So what is that? It's 4:30 in the afternoon. And then the next caption says, hours of fevered research pass. So we'll see if they give us more time. We'll see what hours really mean. So from 4:30, Doc's working late into a Wednesday night. And Doc he figured out part of it. He says the steroids were easy to nail down, but this other compound, it's making the whole thing go crazy. He's never seen anything like it. And he asks Slaughter how the computer analysis is coming, and Slaughter says his best man is on it, and he's talking about mainframe, of course. So they're going to try to reverse engineer this, And Doc, then this is, I like this a lot. And some great, really nice writing here. Doc shows this real compassion for him. He says, I don't like what it's doing to this poor man. And Sarge just gets pissed off and he's like, poor man, these jokers nearly wiped out my soldiers. And Doc's argument is, these men are just victims. They're being used by some madman and we've got to stop him. That's really great. I like it. That's just the conflicting, that is the characters working as the characters. It's throwing conflict into the conversation. I definitely feel like that's the kind of thing Hama would write into his stories. It's stuff like that makes me think this really works. And then the art on this page is great. Little places they can find it to make the 3D pop. Doc's looking through a microscope and the microscope pops out at you. It's funny. It's kind of a cheesecake panel. It's Sergeant Slaughter's butt. But it's the camera's really low and throwing a fun angle on this conversation between Sergeant Slaughter and Doc. And it ends up being Slaughter's butt being the part that pops in 3D. But what it does is it just adds variety to a talking head scene, which is always hard. You always want to look for some action in a regular comic, let alone a 3D comic. So it works.
Yo, Joe!
So now we see Mainframe's fingers dancing over the keyboard like a concert pianist's as he desperately tries to find the secret of the formula. So, in great background work, and this is it. Like, this is the key to, well, I think the key to so many good comic books is you have to establish where they're at, man. So much of what I consider to be inferior, poor comic storytelling, it's not that the characters don't look great or they're flashy or they're, it's a jazzy drawing of that character or the other character. It's, you don't know what they're doing. And we're here to like experience what they're doing and the place they're living in and the experience they're having. And so scenes like this, it's just doing background work. It's literally doing the job of drawing. It works so well. It just establishes where they're at. You got guys leaning on computers, waiting, sitting in chairs, doing the job, and it just sets you in a tone for what's happening. The second panel is Mainframe sitting back casually in his chair trying to figure out stuff. Like, that's a great bit of artistic acting. And he figures out that he's running a, quote, tapeworm program, and it's going to make comparisons on this sample until it finds the right match, and then it should be able to backtrack and give them an antidote. And I like this. Sergeant Slaughter credits him like, hey, great job. But that doesn't mean any more workouts. I want that body in the same shape as that head. You got it? You got it, Sarge. Like, that's fun, because that's very Sarge, right? He's not going to let that go. So they go off to get some food while they let the computer do its work.
Yo, Joe!
And in a real quick moment of fun character, they even add that Sergeant Slaughter's going to let them buy lunch just because he's that generous. And that's fun. Again, that's fun character just for a beat because you got a little panel left to tell. So now Wednesday at 20:45 hours, so 40 minutes or 4 hours later, Doc is still working on it. And I'm not sure who he's... See, and this is where it's tough. I don't know who Doc's talking to. He says, you could have made a good doctor you've got the hands for, and that is Doc. He says, yeah, but my bedside manner isn't helping this guy any. But they don't really, I genuinely don't know what Joe that is. It might be Falcon, maybe. But they're basically saying they can't figure it out. Somewhere in there, they're going to find it. This, and it's 2/3 of a page. This is definitely one of those bloat moments of, you don't need this. We've established that. We don't need to cut back to them. Why are we doing that? And at the bottom of the page, we cut to Raptor working. It's like he's working with the new test subjects. He's got a whip out and he's slave whipping them. I will tolerate no more failures on our raid. Do you hear? So he's whipping these mutates. And the doctor says, stop. This isn't helping. And this is funny. He says, one of the reasons I'm tracking this is all happening on Wednesday. Raptor says today's assault will be successful. This is all happening the same day, Raptor. You've already had an unsuccessful assault today. Like, what's up?
Yo, Joe!
The doctor's trying to get a hold of Raptor. Raptor's flipping out. The doctor calls him a madman. You care nothing about the experiment, just your own sick ravings. And that's when Raptor belts the Doctor one. And this is, to get that action, to get that 3D effect. That's what's happening here. It's the belt, the punch of the swing of the arm, Raptor swing of the arm, knocking the Doctor back. 3 panels on the bottom show Raptor in motion. Probably one of the best drawings of Raptor in motion that I've seen. From overhead, he really looks like a bird in motion. Very much like Hawkman, obviously. But it's a really fun drawing of him, and he's just popping this Doctor. And again, more fists, because you want more fists. You want things flying out at the reader. And he's beating the crap out of this Doctor. But that is stopped by Cobra Commander stepping into frame in his, battle armor.
Yo, Joe!
So now we go back to a nice establishing shot, and we see Cobra Commander in his full battle armor. And again, it's lightly drawn so that the armor pops. There's not a lot of hatch work on it. It's very, it's fun. Like, so you see, actually, it makes sense that he would go on to do layouts for animation, because his ability to Cruz, I'm talking about, his ability to portray the action without a ton of definition, although there's certainly plenty to be had, but without a ton of definition on it, he's really nailing the form here and nailing the forms of the characters. That's very animation heavy. That's really how you do, animation, where it's just forms and shapes and stuff to suggest motion, or actually to show motion when you're talking animation. So on the page here, we're suggesting it. So this is nice, but it's Cobra Commander basically saying, are you frustrated because you're failing? And a nice little close-up of him in that weird mask. That mask is weird. I'm sorry. It really is. But Cobra Commander is most concerned about the attack on the Joe's Academy. Are you still going ahead as planned? So we attack at 0500 hours. So that must be 5 a.m. on Thursday morning. And Raptor's altered army will be no match, or be more than a match for the Joes, the puny Joes. So they got to get into position. So sure enough, here in this last panel, it's Thursday, 0500 hours. The dawn comes up like thunder, and it's I don't even know if that's Raptor's leg. It's someone screaming attack, and they're attacking, coming up over a hill.
Yo, Joe!
Now we get the full, like a 2/3 or a 1/3 splash page of all these monsters kind of crawling over the hills of the rolling hills of the Great Lakes, and Raptor flying, which is neat, but also Cobra Commander on what has to be a version of Serpentor's chariot. It is, it's kind of like a little flying motorcycle. Like he's sitting on a seat, but it's got the snake head that Serpentor's chariot had. So this is interesting. I've never seen this before. But we get forward, my slaves, for the glory of Cobra. So this is one of those great cases where Cobra Commander comes in at the end and takes credit for it, right? So now they're his slaves. And he says, for the glory of Cobra, and Raptor yells, and Raptor, right? So the whole thing was Raptor's plan, and yet Cobra Commander swooping in, and he's going to take credit. That's classic Cobra Commander. And again, really great writing. I think that fits in with the way the show worked, too, and the comic book. So in a temporary command post, it's Falcon waking up Sergeant Slaughter. I feel like Sergeant Slaughter would be awake at 0500 hours. I feel like they'd already be awake. But they're, move out, form a battle line. And in moments, the Joes stand ready to face their most bizarre enemy ever. It looks like we've got Outback out there in his survival t-shirt. Roadblock is in his V2 look. He's got his Madu set up and ready to go. Tunnel Rat's there. Jinx is there. I kind of can't make out anywhere else. I think that might be Mainframe in the back. That's it. That's all I can make out. And again, it's this 3D art. It's really great to look at, but it is very hard to tell some of the more fine details. And it also tells you how important how important silhouettes are to character design, and how important shapes are to defining a classic look. That breaks down a lot when it's talking about G.I. Joe, because you are talking about people who are all military, right? So they're all part of a unit. So it's really variations on military stuff. So it's much, much harder to differentiate G.I. Joe characters by silhouette, by form. But that the rule applies when you're talking about, like, let's say the X-Men, and, talking about the X-Men of that era, that uncanny, or that 80s uncanny team. You look at that silhouette, you know who Nightcrawler is, you know who Wolverine is, you know who Colossus is, you know who Storm is. You know them by their uniforms and by their silhouettes. You don't need as many visual clues as are needed in characters that are a little more like G.I. Joe, where they're all wearing versions of, fatigues, versions of t-shirts, versions of camouflage, things like that. So it does break down, and it's a lot harder with G.I. Joe, which is why I think when you do the Joe series, it is so important to keep them in their knowable uniforms, or at least whatever uniform you're establishing them for that series. Like when they changed Shipwreck into that, into the seaman's cap and the turtleneck, like keep him in that as much as possible versus his old school look. Don't put them in civilian outfits as much, because it's so much harder to tell who's who.
Yo, Joe!
So we've got some more classic action, and this next 2 pages is great because it draws on both his military artistic expertise and his horror expertise. So the Joes are opening fire. You get Roadblock on the Ma Deuce. Everyone's in there, and Sarge is leading them, and there's just so many of them that they keep coming, and they're absolutely laying into these zombie guys. And I use that word zombie appropriately. We get a nice close-up of Sergeant Slaughter saying, "Don't let up." And then we get just a great explosive image of like all the guns firing and just this giant explosion in the background with, bodies flying and body parts, going everywhere. A lot of brat-tat-tats and booms. You see a close-up right down the barrel of Roadblock. They ain't getting past us, And then the firing stops. So now we've got a view of the battlefield, and there's smoke lingering. There's these dead soldiers, just laying on the battlefield. One of the Joes says they're going to be sick.
Yo, Joe!
And now the word zombie comes into play. A stirring, a shuffling of movement. There can be no movement. The final horror of Raptor's twisted experiment stands revealed. Literally zombies. These guys are fighting on, even though they don't have any arms. They don't have any hands. It looks like an actual head is just bouncing, trying to get them screaming, "Kill, kill," which is awesome. And you've got a nice 1/3 splash in the middle of this page. The mutating virus keeps the still living monsters coming, and it's absolutely out of a horror comic. It's awesome. And there's that head just screaming, disembodied, no-legged creatures crawling at the Joes. Like, they are monsters crawling at the Joes. And Sarge and crew, they can't believe it. They're just firing. And they're almost out of ammo. They don't know what to do.
Yo, Joe!
And obviously in a 3D book, it's even harder because you don't have any of the colors to give you any kind of hints. So even the bravest men must turn when faced with the unknown. And Sergeant Slaughter's yelling, "Fall back to the academy." And this is fun. I believe that's Falcon saying, "How about back to New Jersey?" That's kind of funny. Tell headquarters we can't hold these monsters back, because these are monsters. The enemy's advancing, and Falcon's calling in. It's a nice drawing of Falcon. He looks very Sergeant Rocky, very 70s war comics. It's really cool. And now an hour later, looks like they're back at the academy, and the Joes have kind of regrouped. And meanwhile, back at the lab, now this is G.I. Joe lab, they finally figured out that the bird DNA has caused mutation, which has accelerated the steroids all out of whack. And Doc says, the computer has come up with a couple potentials. The best one, this one's the best chance we got. Let's get it down to the holding cells.
Yo, Joe!
So they're going to test it on that captured prisoner. Monitors on the bioreadouts are running. We've run tests on this normal subjects. There's no adverse side effects. Our men will be safe, gentlemen. Antidotes commence testing. They filled this guy's cell with this yellow vapor. The guy's vital signs are dropping, so they're killing him. But it is actually almost normal. The smoke's clearing, and it worked. So the guy was raging. He is now actually normal. He's kind of calmed down a lot. And this looks to me to be Admiral Flag. Because they don't, again, this is one of those cases where they don't name him, but it looks to me like it's Admiral Flag. Get this stuff produced right now. We've got no time to waste. At that moment, in the hills above the academy, Cobra Commander and Raptor are surveying the battlefield. There are hundreds, if not, there are hundreds of these soldiers running the fields. How it's taking them an hour and a half to reach the base, I have no idea, because there's a lot of dudes attacking them. And Cobra Commander says the attack may commence at any time.
Yo, Joe!
So Cobra Commander, Cobra helicopters, they're broadcasting demoralizing messages to the inhabitants of the town of the Great Lakes. Surrender, I am your new leader. My army cannot be stopped. We get some cars that are coming towards the camera, so that's adding a nice 3D effect. People are making their way out of town with their families and babies in tow. Like, it's a full-on assault. It's very like the assault on Springfield kind of a thing, but they're taking over this town of Great Lakes. Meanwhile, the Joes are sitting at the Great Lakes Naval Academy, apparently watching this happen, because these guys are screaming, kill, kill. The altered army is choking people to death. Like, this is a grisly scene. Someone is screaming "Aye" over the top of it. Raptor says nothing can stop us. Soon the country will realize the greatness of Raptor. That's a prophetic line if I've ever heard one. And then they're moving forward again. Onward, my fine warriors. Onward for Cobra. And it's Cobra Commander popping out in the 3D, standing in front of his troops. They're heading towards a line of G.I. Joes to fight.
Yo, Joe!
So all the heavy artillery is being fired at these monsters. The Joes are literally shooting everything. There's some air support coming in. These are not Sky Strikers. At least they're not drawn like that. It's just some kind of generic jets. And the jets are releasing canisters of this synthetic antidote all over the field. That general or admiral screams, all guns cease fire. The bombers will take it from here. And the yellow vapor just spreads all over the field. Raptor doesn't know what this foul concoction is.
Yo, Joe!
And then the smoke begins to clear. The field is again covered with the fallen. So now these zombies are really, really dead. And Commander is upset. He says, this can't be. You said your men were invincible. Raptor doesn't know how to answer that. The formulas work. The mutation reversed. Medics swarm over the field to help who they can. And the Joes advance on those responsible for this nightmare. And they capture Cobra Commander and Raptor, which is rare in these stories, right? Usually the bad guys get away and they're like, hey, we saved the day. No, they actually capture them. And Sergeant Slaughter's got his pistol or his gun on him. Raptor screaming, I'm innocent, I swear. He ordered me to torture those poor people. Cobra Commander is saying, this man is mad. I try to stop him to halt this insane experiment. And peace begins to return to the plains of Illinois, and spring begins. And let's plant these bozos in a jail where they belong. They've got a lot of cleaning up to do. And Cobra Commander says, I should never have listened to you. And Raptor says, this is your fault. Yeah. It's all yours. And that's how we end G.I. Joe in 3D issue number 1. So good. Really, really good. We get an ad for official How to Draw Robotech book number 4. So if you ever want to learn how to draw Robotechs, that's out there. Another ad for Blackthorn 3D books. We got G.I. Joe 3D, Transformers, the same one from the front. And now we've got a Blackthorn Outposts. Oh, by Mike Kaluta and Charles Vest cover. That's nice. That's also, it looks like it's in 3D as well. And Transformers number 1. And you can join this. You got a subscription for the G.I. Joe magazine. Each issue is packed with the G.I. Joe action stories, colorful illustrations, dazzling graphics, and a big pull-out poster. Plus, you'll find entertainment news, celebrities, puzzles, and games. It's all printed on top-quality glossy paper. You get 4 big issues of G.I. Joe magazine for only $7. That is less than $2 an issue. Subscribe today. You send it to G.I. Joe magazine in Des Moines, Iowa. Man, there's one only $7 for a year. That's a steal. And then the final page is it's an ad for the Transformers 3D number 1. It's cool because they use the colors. It's not, that's what I'm saying. There's something with the colors on this cover. I don't think they had a full color palette. I really do think they were dealing with 4 colors. Because the back panel it's Optimus Prime, but it is not red by any stretch of the imagination. The colors are actually those used by the Stunticons? Who had like that brown, purple, beige color combo, which I really liked a lot. That's the color on this back page. So yeah, these colors definitely were dealing with definitely do a limited color palette for the covers. That was great. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to revisit issue number 2 next week. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much. I sure do appreciate you listening and appreciate your time. And now you, Joe, enjoying is half the battle.